into the world of veganism? What's kind of brought you here?
Yeah, well, I love that question because it started with a lot of conflict, actually. So I've been vegan for this month, it'll be 3 years. So now I'm well into the world. But how it started was my sister bringing it up at a casual family day at the water park, believe it or not. And this is so ingrained in my brain because I was a college athlete. I was a gymnast my entire childhood. Growing up into college, I did acrobatics and tumbling. And I felt like I knew how to eat as an athlete. I knew how to eat healthy. I knew what an athlete needed to fuel their body. And that was very based around animal proteins and making sure I had, the chicken and vegetables too, but always that protein piece, right? And so I remember showing up at the water park, and my family and I, we were all in the car and talking about what we were going to have for dinner that night, kind of planning ahead. And my sister kind of just threw in there, very left field at the time, I don't know if I'm going to have chicken tonight. And I was like, oh, okay, why not? She's like, oh, your body doesn't actually really need it. And we're going to have like potatoes and all these other veggies. And it immediately, like me being a competitive person, sparked this dialogue that lasted the entire day. And she had become fascinated by vegetarian and veganism through some YouTubers that she followed. And that's what they were doing. And so she had learned a lot about it. And she wasn't even vegetarian quite yet, but it was something that was fascinating her. And so I asked her all of the questions that anybody who hears the word vegetarian or vegan asks. Where's your protein? What about this? And where are the ethics? And all these questions. And, at the end of the day, I wasn't vegan by the end of the day, but I was really fascinated by it. And I just, something had turned in me because something that I thought I knew so well was now completely in question. And that kind of sparked the journey to get me to where I am now, which is vegan for 3 years.
Given how, ingrained it was in you, that sort of traditional sense of eating like an athlete, etc., the clean eating, the protein, the animal protein, all the rest of it. Given that was kind of ingrained in you from a young age, and it had worked, from your experience, you had been fit, healthy, exceeding in your sport, an athlete at a great level. I'm just intrigued as to like how long it then took you from, okay, I'm super fascinated by this thing. There's this air of competition. There's this air of curiosity. It sounds like as somebody who's kind of like an achiever and someone who's competitive, you kind of thought, I need to find out about this. Even if it's just so that I can say that it's wrong, I need to find out about it.
Yeah.
How long was that process before you realized actually I can exceed at the same level as I was before?
In retrospect, it wasn't that long. I graduated from college in 2017, so that was like kind of the end of my collegiate athletics career, and that conversation with my sister happened shortly thereafter. And so it was kind of that time leaving college athletics, moving into whatever was next for me, that I started picking up, maybe because I was done with school, I started picking up more research on this other thing. And so I ended up going and coaching the same sport that I had been a part of right out of college. And so as I moved into that role, it was fascinating because that's when I started to adopt being vegetarian. And I remember at like my last meat meal that I had, it was the only option because I was at this event that I was volunteering at and didn't know I was going to have to be there all day. And literally the only food they had was like a hot dog or hamburger. And I remember having it. And that was like the first time that I felt like guilty for eating it because I had now learned so much. And so up until that, it was kind of dabbling with vegetarian meals. And that day was like, okay, no, I can't do this anymore. And I went vegetarian and shortly after I went vegan. So the whole process, I mean, it was like 6 months, 8 months maybe of learning and kind of easing in. It wasn't just like a one day I was not vegan and one day the next day I was. But which I think was really important for my journey, because it was like a lot of trial and error and seeing what worked and what didn't. And at the end of the day, everything did work, So there was nothing, it was like, oh, well, this lifestyle is working great. So why would I go back to that if all this information that I'm learning now is telling me that it's healthy? And yeah, so anyways, that was kind of a tangent, but
Not at all.
yeah.
Was there a particular kind of argument, whether environmental, ethical, nutritional, that you remember kind of tipping you over the edge, if you like?
Yeah, it really started, I mean, now it's kind of a blend of all three. My husband majored in environmental science in college. And so that was something that, he wasn't vegan yet either, but that was something that both of us were passionate about this environmental aspect. And so that, and combined with the ethical standpoint, it was just too much information to ignore. The more we learned, the less we could turn away from it and just continue to kind of sweep past it. It felt wrong. And so it was probably initially those environmental and more ethical reasons, but the more I learned, the more I saw the health point as well. And so now if I knew it was really beneficial for these two big things, but also for my health, it just became a no-brainer at the end of it.
Did you get kind of asked questions, quizzed about it from, when you went back to kind of your athletic career, if you like, and pick that up as a coach?
Yeah.
Were you getting quizzed about, why are you going down this route? Surely that can't be an effective way to train. And were you getting those kind of questions, or were people pretty open to it?
Yeah, a million questions. And from both sides of it, people who were open to it and just were curious. Oh, what is that you're doing? Like, it seems to be working for you. Tell me about it. Really wanting to know. And then the complete other side, that doesn't make any sense. That's not right. Your plant food is gross. So both sides of it, and not just from the athletics, from my family. I think family's been one of the toughest. Was both me and my husband have big families. And so whenever there's family gatherings and someone else to tell, and we would try our best to kind of keep it to ourselves. Like, we're not going to be the difficult vegans. We're just going to bring our own food, but then it inevitably, like, you show up a place and there's nothing there, or someone offers you something. Oh, I can cook for you. And you're like, it's not that your food is bad. It's just that we're not going to be eating it. So a lot of kind of sticky conversations that now we feel so much more equipped to handle and more confident, I think, in ourselves and our choices. And a lot more people know it as, just a normal thing, especially for us, me and him. So yeah, it's been a weird field to navigate.
Yeah, absolutely. You raise a really interesting point there, and I'd love to get your kind of, hear about your experience in this particular subject. But when you first go vegan, there's always a kind of everybody's sort of who you meet who is omnivorous tends to treat you as the the font of all knowledge when it comes to veganism, even though you might have only been doing it for a short period of time.
Yeah.
They want to know whether all of the ethical arguments hold water, whether the environmental aspects are real or not. I read this article, I heard that that's not effective, I heard that you can't get the right protein source, all these kind of things. And you do go through a bit of, I certainly did anyway, went through a bit of a period of like almost going into conversations almost a bit embattled from the beginning, thinking, okay, right, I'm ready, like I've done my homework, etc. I'd love to hear a bit about your journey in that sort of space and how you've navigated it over the kind of 3 years.
Yeah, absolutely. Just like you said, it was kind of gearing up for battle every time, and so at first probably subconsciously, and then it became this as the questions, just the same questions over and over. It was like, okay, these are probably the questions we're going to get. How are we going to handle? And it was automatically entering into this like defensive place. Like, I need to defend what I'm doing. And, deep down feeling bad for, I don't know if bad's the right term, but feeling like I'm causing a problem. I'm causing discomfort for someone, because what I believe now with veganism, like I'm doing this for the environment, for my health, for the animals. And that is such a touchy point for other people, because it's like, if I'm doing it to save an animal, then what are you doing? And people know that. People know that. And it's really tough to swallow. That's why I battled my sister so hard in the beginning, because the same thing. And, I think as time went on, we did inevitably gather more information. And so we got more ingrained, in ourselves. Like, we know why we're doing this for ourselves. And I was really thankful to have my husband throughout this whole journey with me. My sister is also vegan. My other sister is vegetarian. His sister ended up going vegan too. So we kind of had this little community start to form where we could lean on each other. And we had to have these conversations of, okay, when we show up at grandma's house, or at the family gathering, we need to just do our own thing. And if it comes up, like, be polite, like, be a little bit where the activist in us wants to, be like, this is why we're doing it, and, but almost like tone it down a little bit, and not, it is kind of to make other people comfortable, because it is such a big topic. And I feel like if you want to get something across, you kind of have to give it in small doses sometimes, like enough to kind of pique the interest, like, oh, I didn't even think of that, but not so much that you kind of scare people off. So that's kind of the approach now. And after 3 years, it feels a lot more natural to have those kind of conversations, and even this kind of conversation. I couldn't have done this in the same way 3 years ago.
Well, yeah, I think some of those experiences you sort of, well, I did anyway. You feel a little bit like, you're probably the only person who's been through that. And then the more vegans I kind of met, the more I heard that the stories were the same. They had the same arguments, like you said, the same 25 questions are slung at you at every family gathering about, whether it's protein, whether it's, I heard about combine harvesters actually kill more animals, that, all those kind of things. So, yeah, I think you're right. It's sort of, I personally anyway find sort of comfort in talking to other vegans and hearing that story. And like you say, it's an interesting choice. I still battle this actually now. I don't know if you do, if it's just me, but I still battle that piece of what the right approach is. I feel like most of the time the sort of the right thing to do feels to, like, to take people on a journey, meet them where they are, those kind of things. And I think that probably is most effective. I kind of always use the kind of the sort of phrasing of, like, thinking about the minute before I went vegan, I was probably pretty resistant until I'd made up my mind. So actually, did I want somebody sort of preaching to me or trying to shock me or whatever? But then with the same token, there's also part of me that thinks, particularly when I think about the climate change aspects and the environmental aspects, I sometimes do think, we just don't have time. People need to understand. They need to understand the gravity of it. Is that something you sort of, particularly given that your husband, you came at it initially environmentally and then the rest of it followed. Is that something you kind of, you battle?
I'm so happy you brought this up, because just yesterday I was at dinner with my dad, and he, just in the conversation, he was like, oh my gosh, I just read this article that said, I forget the number of years that it is, but in some amount of years, climate change will be irreversible. Did you guys know that? And we kind of looked at each other and looked at him like, yes, we knew that. And we've told you, and we were like, we kind of laughed because we were like, yep. And he was like, yeah, okay. I figured you guys probably knew that. But it was such this turning point of like, oh my gosh, that finally stuck in his head. That finally was something that just all of a sudden it hit him in a different way. And I think it has so much to do, like you said, meeting people where they're at. What are they going through in life right now? Like, what information can they take in? And for some reason, on that day, it hit him harder than it had ever hit him before. And so to your question of whether to give people little doses or whether to make it, like we're running out of time. I think you do have to navigate it per situation. Every situation is different, and really like you will start an argument if you, but if you know that you're going to start an argument, if you're ready to start an argument, maybe that's okay with you. Who are you talking to? Is it your grandparents? Like maybe you don't want to pick a fight with them, but is it your friend, a longtime friend? Maybe you can pick a fight with them, and it's because it's all in good fun. So if you're gonna ruin relationships, that's probably not the way to approach it, and you do have to, because then you don't want to be like, oh my gosh, we can't invite them to anything because they're not going to like what we eat and they're going to judge us for not eating vegan, and that's kind of a slippery slope to walk to. So I think it kind of depends on the situation. Yeah.
No, I think you're so right. And actually, as you said it, the sort of words that popped into my head are like emotional intelligence. I think there's sort of, if I think about the most effective people at convincing me of an argument in the course of my life, whether it's veganism or outside, it's always when there's an emotional intelligence to their approach. And you can see it when they deal with other people. There's with some people, they choose to take a harder line because they know that they need that right now. And
right.
I guess it's like thinking about your sporting background, your athletics, your gymnastics. It's kind of like a great coach almost is in that kind of headspace. I don't know if that would be a good analogy from your point of view.
Totally. No, I completely agree. And you think about it too, like different opportunities to have almost like a learning experience, whether that's like when we got married, we had to decide, okay, are we going to serve all vegan food or do we serve non-vegan food as well? Like, we don't really support that, but is that worth the battle? And it was this weird thing to navigate. And still, I don't know what like the right or wrong answer is. We ended up serving a mix of both. Now, 3 years into veganism, would I do the same? I don't know, So it is this really odd ground to navigate. And I think you do have to be emotionally intelligent when you approach situations to know, okay, what am I hoping to get out of this? Am I hoping that someone shows up and is like, oh, it's all vegan. Like now I realize how delicious vegan food is and I'm happy, or could they show up and be really upset, and not that event or that particular thing is like about this person, but I think we have to be aware of how we approach these situations. But the more we can encourage it, the more we can always have vegan options on the table, have it be a normal part of the conversation. Okay, we're going to have a dinner party. Like, what are the different, is there a vegan option? Just make sure there is one, and maybe that is part like becoming more normal to help it just become integrated. And then people don't have to think about it. They're just like, oh, do we have a vegan option?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to get your view on this, actually. Like, do you think that there's a more compelling argument in kind of 2021 than another? And the reason I asked this is I was chatting to somebody from the Vegan Society organisation based over in the UK here about an amazing report they've put together called Planting Value in Our Food System. And it's all about if we had to rip up the rule book on the current food system, the food production system, the distribution system, what could that policy look like?
Yeah.
And they've readied that policy for, in the event that ultimately a government, whether it be through climate change or whatever, needs to take that on. It's kind of, here's the policy ready made. And the author of it is a guy called Dr. Alex Lockwood, and he said, I think when you're thinking about people, society en masse, that climate change is probably the most effective in terms of a short-term likelihood to get people on board. What's your view? I'd love to get your perspective on it.
I think climate change is a huge one. It's sad. I was reading this in a book the other day. It's kind of sad, but people won't just do what's right because they know it's good necessarily. It was a book about podcasting, actually, and it said something about people who want to make these podcasts on really important topics like Syrian refugees or sexual abuse, or these like topics that need to be talked about. But if the podcast is just on that, people won't listen to it. Like, it won't be someone's favorite podcast because it's a lot to take in. And the author described it like broccoli, how you know it's good for you, but you might not be grabbing it every time unless there's some other incentive. And I loved that because, I mean, I love broccoli, but not everyone does. and it's true, so to just do like what's right because you know it's right while it would be awesome if that was the solution, it's clearly not, And so I do think climate change is a huge motivator for pursuing plant-based eating. As we're seeing, places go up in fire, as we're seeing all this terrible stuff with the ocean and pollution and oil spills, like that is very visible evidence of this climate change, where I think people then can wrap their head around it a little bit better. Whereas, even with the animals, like the ethical standpoint, it is visible. Like you can, if you look at a slaughterhouse, it's like you can see it, but it's so easy to just like push over there and not pay attention to it. And then with your health, like that is another really great stance to take. Oh, well, this is a really good proponent for your health. But what is like one of the biggest things with eating vegan is to benefit your long-term health, right? That's not always visible right away. And so I've heard it firsthand from people that just say like, well, what's the saying? Like, I'm here for a good time, not for a long time, and it's like, so though whatever's happening immediate that we can see, it seems like those are the biggest motivators. So when you see bad things happening to the climate, it's like, okay, that's happening right now. Like turkey is on fire. What can we do? And if there's this option that is presenting itself, maybe that's more motivating. So, yeah.
Yeah, I'm with you. It's kind of it's almost a depressing thought when you think about it, because you think, well, why wouldn't people, there's enough slaughterhouse footage out there. There's enough talk of mistreatment of non-human animals in all kinds of different walks of life. Why would people just not do the right thing? But I do think sometimes, unless something has come knocking on your door, like climate change is at the moment, I wonder whether I also think this point that you raised there, and I think it's a fantastic one about messaging about the broccoli. I think it is a really interesting one, and one I've certainly wrestled with, thinking about podcasts, and you think about this, what is it I'm trying to do, what kind of message am I trying to get across, who am I trying to reach? And then I think about some of the podcasts I listen to personally, and they're often probably lighter actually some of the stuff that I put together myself. It's more about people chatting who are talking about all kinds of different things, and films and this, that and the other, and if there's some broccoli dropped in there, then I'll probably take it. But some of the podcasts, like you say, that are pure broccoli, maybe I don't sometimes. It's true. Interesting you raise it.
Yeah.
More of amusing than a question that was. I'd love to hear. I'd love to hear a little bit about some of the amazing stuff you do, because when I look through your CV, there's like 6 or 7 angles we could talk about. You do so much. Yeah. So I'd love to hear a little bit about some of the things that you're up to at the moment.
Yeah.
Surfing and all. It's incredible.
Well, thank you. First of all, I really appreciate it. I am very much a multi-passionate person, and someone who came out of college or went into college with no real idea of like what I was passionate about other than my one sport that I was doing, And so going through college and now being out of college, it's been just real time to navigate that and try things out. And I'm very thankful for the support in my life and for my own ambition that's allowed me to go and just try things. So I've coached. I've coached college athletics for the sport that I did. I was a head gymnastics coach for my own high school gymnastics team. I'm a certified yoga instructor. I podcast. I did a whole other bunch of things in there, like being a virtual assistant, being an online coach before I kind of came to this world of podcasting, which I love. I love the podcast, and it's based on exactly this, that we are so much more than the boxes that society tells us to check off, and we are more than just the title on our resume, and we're told when we were young, we're still told today that if you're a career changer, if you try a bunch of different things and you pivot really quickly, that's a bad thing. And I disagree. I think that is a really good thing because you get a lot of exposure to different things and you try a lot, and then you figure out what you like and what you don't like, and you move on to the next thing. So right now it is that podcast, Here for More podcast is the title, along with retreats, which my husband and I are starting to put together. Our first one is this December in Mexico. It's a surf and yoga retreat, which are both really important parts of our lives. We're big surfers. Yoga has come into our lives from taking and me teaching, and my husband getting into it, probably because of me teaching. And that's a plant-based retreat as well. So kind of just melding a lot of the things that we love into one, and bringing a group of people together to experience those things that we love. So that's what we're doing right now. That's what I'm doing right now.
I love this premise, and actually on a personal note, it really has resonated with me recently of sort of being in the traditional career job. I've been in the same organization for the best part of a decade, and in the last kind of year or two with the podcasting and so on, I've been drawn to other projects, and taking the bold move. I saw a post that you did a while back where you were talking about what's wrong with having 6 or 7 revenue streams, 6 or 7 things going on, and it just struck me as like, if I wish I had that kind of somebody giving me that advice when I came out of like university, college sort of equivalent, because I think it's just, I don't know about you, but it just feels like a more fulfilling way to live your life, really, to pursue multiple interests, because like you say, we're not just one. We're not one entity. Mm-hmm. I think often our careers sort of force us to be one entity.
Yeah.
Which again is more of a music reflection point, but with that in mind, thinking of the podcast, and thinking of the philosophy actually, was that something that just appeared to you almost like you just because like it feels to me quite an alien concept when I think about the traditional path to tread.
Yeah.
If I think about conversations I've had with my parents throughout upbringing and so on, where did that come from? That kind of inspiration to be so varied and it to be okay.
Yeah, that, great question. It did kind of, it slowly developed as the more I learned about myself, going through college, and I got a master's degree, and I pursued this route that was still untraditional, but more traditional. It was a job in graduate school, and I had an internship in an office, and just nothing that I did ever felt. I was like, none of this stuff is what I'm going to do. None of it. And I have a master's degree in public health. And so one could argue that I am engaging in public health every day that I talk about these things, but as far as the traditional routes for that, just nothing ever felt right. Even teaching yoga, I love teaching yoga, but I just knew like, there's something else, there's something more. And it was a while before I realized like, well, why can't I teach a little bit of yoga over here, but then also do this other thing and also do this other thing. And there is such thing as spreading yourself too thin. But also, if you don't go out and try things, you never know what could be. And so I think that's where some of it came from, was this like searching for the feeling of almost like a high, like what's going to give me that feeling of excitement, of fulfillment, and I learned very quickly, it's not at this desk, it's not over here. And I just kept searching, and I'm still searching, but I've been able to kind of land on what I was just talking about, is just having a few different things, and not putting all this pressure on one thing. Like I, Natalie Kraus, am this role and that is my whole life. Like, no, even if you are one thing, like maybe you're a dentist, you still are so many other things. You might be a yogi and a surfer and whatever, and those are just as much a part of your life. So the actual title, Here for More, came to me totally on a whim, because I was starting a blog, actually, not a podcast originally. And my husband and I we built out a van to go travel around the country, the US in. And I was like, I need remote income. I need to make money online. So I quickly was like researching like how to make remote income. And a blog was an idea that kept coming up, which did not work out for me. It's hard to make money from a blog, but other people do it. So it could be working for other people. But I just was like, I got to make a blog, and I didn't know what to title it. And I was like, well, we're just here for more. We're here for more than what society tells us to do. And that's literally how it started. And it just continues to become more and more true every day.
It's a thought that just pops into my head as you said that there, which is, I think about, every social setting you're ever in, you talk about weddings and so on, you're at someone's wedding, and the question everybody asks is, well, what do you do?
What do you do?
And the way that's answered, I'm a dentist. Like, that is what I am.
Yeah.
It just shows you how deeply ingrained that notion that we are our work, that we are here to work, in a system. It just shows how deeply ingrained that is. I must say, it's an incredibly sage thought process to have gone on straight out of college. I'm very impressed and very jealous. I feel like I'd be further along in life had I have met you when I was younger.
Well, thank you. No, it's, I'm grateful for it too. I've had a number of people actually say that to both me and my husband, like, oh my gosh, we're 25 and 26. And, they're like, wow, you know this thing. And in my head, I'm like, how do not more people think this way, or know this thing? So I don't know exactly what it was that brought me to here, really when you get down to it, but I'm grateful for it, because even on the days that I feel stressed and being an entrepreneur is really tough, I still would take this, every time over being in an office. If that's for you, that's awesome, but it's not for me. So I'm happy to have other options.
100%, absolutely. I'd love to talk about the retreats a little bit.
Yeah.
Like, when did that idea come up? You mentioned it's relatively new. You've got your first one planned, but where did the idea come from? And obviously, these things are two kind of passions of yours in surfing and yoga, etc. And to combine the two, have you kind of thought, we know a community of people who these two passions are absolutely aligned with, and there is almost a market for it? Or again, is this just like we're passionate about it, let's just do it and see who's interested?
It's a little bit of both. I actually attended a retreat in Bali in 2017 after I graduated college with my mom. We went to a surf and yoga retreat in Bali. And it was more of like a surf retreat, but then yoga is just something they also offered. Yoga is so complementary to all athletics, you know, to stretch and to lengthen your body in different ways. And especially with surfing, I think they're really, really complement each other. And, you know, too, just when you get into like the metaphorical part of it, sports athletics are fast. They're quick paced, you know, fast twitch muscles and competitive. And yoga can be fast, but it can also be the total opposite. It's like slow down. Whenever I hear someone say yoga's too slow for me, I think it was too slow for me too. And that's when I realized I needed it most, you know, to just be with yourself. And so, yeah, I think they complement each other really well. And after I attended that retreat, I'm also someone who really likes to plan things. Whenever there's like, oh, where are we going for dinner in my family? They're like, Natalie, will you find the restaurant? You know how to read the Yelp reviews, make sure it's vegan, you know, make sure it's good. And I take that on joyfully because I do feel like I can do it better than others. I feel like it's a strong suit for me. So planning in combination with attending a retreat that I had a wonderful experience at. After that retreat, I became a yoga teacher. I got more into surfing. It was just something in the back of my mind of like, maybe one day that would be cool. And then we had the pandemic, and we still have the pandemic, and it's this massive thing of no travel. But I have some other friends in the yoga space who also run retreats, some who have been in it for many years. And I've kind of watched how they've done it and how they've started to bring them back even through this time. And I just kept thinking, like, why couldn't I do that? And I don't have I'm not, you know, actively teaching yoga, so I don't have like this massive community of yogis and surfers. But, you know, to your point, it is something that both me and my husband are very passionate about. And we know, like, if we love it, there's got to be other people who love it too. And it's not a new thing, you know, retreats have been around for years and years and years. So it's, you know, we're like, okay, there will be people.
100%.
Yeah. So we back in like February, maybe, we started getting really serious about it and researching, and finally decided on a place and put a deposit down. And now we're about halfway filled for our retreat for this December. Wow. Yeah. So, and all beginner surfers. We weren't sure. We made it like open to all levels. Like, oh, you could be a beginner, you can be advanced. And the people that have signed up so far are all beginners, which we think is super cool, that people are wanting to kind of step outside their comfort zone and try this sport. So we're very excited for it.
Oh, 100%. It sounds idyllic, to be honest.
Yeah.
You know, combining the three things of kind of Mexico surfing and yoga. It's like, well, wow, and four really in the plant-based foods too. I mean, what more could anyone want? I love the idea of it.
I agree.
Thinking about like again, I just want to come back to the kind of the setup of it.
Yeah.
And you being, you know, entering this kind of entrepreneurial space at a time when there's a global pandemic on.
Yeah.
That for me is like a terrifying concept.
Yeah.
And I know there's lots of people in this, you know, who are taking stock of where they're at in life, and in the pandemic, I think, has forced a bit of that self-reflection. But love to sort of get your view on, you know, what being an entrepreneur has been like, setting up a new business, setting up an organization at this kind of time. Like, how has that been? Have you kind of, has it been a scary process? And I guess, like, to your point, it's still being in it, you know.
Yeah.
How has it felt?
It has felt every emotion, probably. And two, we started, you know, kind of the entrepreneurial journey before the pandemic ever came around. So, you know, what started as one thing has now evolved tenfold. And especially with the retreats, you know, they're always in the back of our head. We're like, are we actually going to be able to go on this thing? You know, is it going to get shut down? You know, you never know, which 2 years ago, no one would ever have thought, you know? And, so yeah, it's been scary, but I also know if I just sit here and don't try to go for it, and then I could have gone for it, I'll just be like, man, why didn't I just try? You know? And so you kind of do that, like, best case scenario, worst case scenario, and the best outweighs what the worst could be. So yes, it's scary. It is challenging, especially to try to market travel to people who, you know, aren't sure, like, whether they should leave their homes or whether they should travel. And obviously, like, we're paying attention to it. So we're not trying to put anyone in harm's way, and we're making sure all those regulations are up to speed. But yeah, it's scary, but it also is, like, the pandemic, not just for our businesses, but for, like, our van pursuits, that allowed us to build our van and to go travel in it. At the time, my husband was I was teaching yoga and everything, so I had not the traditional 9 to 5, but he was in an office, you know, 9 to 5 every day. And so the only time our van would get worked on was on the weekends, not really at night because we were too tired. And it took a long time to build. So it's like the pandemic was this opportunity for him to be out of the office. He ended up leaving his job. And we were like, okay, we're just going to work on this thing. And same with our businesses. We're just going to work on this thing and learn everything we can. So in the same sense, you know, it was this opportunity to kind of shut the rest out and just like, this is what we're doing. And so as a result, you know, kind of how you were saying, like, I have all these different hats and all these different things on my resume. But that was possible probably largely because we weren't doing anything else. We couldn't travel, you know, we couldn't do these things. And so now we've gotten to learn a lot more about business, a lot more about ourselves. It's totally overwhelming, you know, when you start getting into taxes and contracts and the legalities, you know, but you just take it one step at a time, and we're making our way.
Absolutely, you are. I mean, I guess you both are testament to this, but I'd love to get your view on it. Do you think actually with the benefit of, you know, maybe in a few years' time, with the benefit of hindsight, and, you know, obviously accepting, putting aside there's been dreadful
Yes.
tragedy and loss through this pandemic, but do you think there will, out the end of it, there will be a lot of people who've actually made some pretty bold decisions, and off the back of this moment of reflection, you know, do you think there's an element of, for many people, they were just on this treadmill almost of this is modern life, the 9 to 5s, the offices, the I am a whatever, insert profession here, and then they've you know, they've just been forced to hit this pause button and had this moment of reflection. Like I said, with all the caveat of the less positive stories. But do you think that is something that will kind of come out of this over time?
Yeah, I think yes and no. I think it goes both ways. I think some people will take that the opportunity that they had to kind of reassess their life and reassess, oh, do I like working remote? I didn't know this was an option. What can I do with this? And they'll run with that. You know, and just the notion of kind of like life is short and you never know what's going to happen. And so to really just grab life by the reins and run with it 100%. But then I think there's another group too that will just step right back into the office, but maybe, you know, kind of talking it through out loud, maybe it's because they realize that is something they value more than they thought they did. So maybe they felt like stuck in this routine and they didn't like the office, but then once they didn't have that anymore, maybe they realized, oh, actually that was serving me pretty well. So, you know, at the end of the day, I think a majority of us have learned something, you know, about ourselves and about the way we work. So I would hope that kind of continues, that more mindful, like conscious decision rather than just clocking in, clocking out every day, whatever it is that you're doing.
Yeah, 100%. The mindfulness element of it, the awareness of where we're at, I think is, you know, for me personally, is probably the biggest reflection. Is And like you said, some things you realise, some things you were resentful of that you realised that actually you loved. You know, I was talking to somebody a while back, and they were talking actually about their commute, and they were saying that the commute that they used to hate, you know, they had to train into London, and it was an hour, and you know, etc. Actually, was like their moment of like decompressing, of reflection, like, and they didn't have this point, and they actually, because they were working from home, decided that they were going to create a commute for themselves. They're going to just like walk around a certain like part of their where they lived, just to give themselves the same period of time, you know. And it did strike me as kind of like, it's fascinating the way that we fall into patterns that some are beneficial for us, some aren't. But we fall into these patterns and often don't necessarily reflect on them. So I think it's just an interesting. It is an interesting kind of like mass psychological experiment in a way, in a sort of strange way. Much as it's full of horrors at the same time. But you know, we'll caveat it with that, obviously. But yeah.
No, I was just gonna say I agree with you. And those kind of like that moment where you had all this time at home maybe, and you're like, what am I doing? I would have loved this time at home a month ago, and now I'm like tired of being at home. And so it's made me ask the question, and I'm sure other people too, like, you know, what are we working so hard for? Are we working hard for time at home, and or are we working hard to retire, and then what, you know, or we want to go take a trip to somewhere, maybe, okay, and then what, you know, and what are those other things that you can do to fill your time that will still give you a lot of life other than your career, right? Because that's just one part of you. So it's something that I still am thinking about all the time. That mindfulness piece, right?
Yeah, me too. I mean, this feels like a therapy session.
Okay.
But absolutely, look, for that very reason, that is something that's definitely like been on my mind, is what is it that what we're here for, what we're working for, what's the end goal? Is it that the 2 days of the week at the end of the 7 that's when you live?
Right.
And is that right? Like, you know, do we want to reduce it to kind of like 2/7 of our time is the time when we enjoy ourselves, and the rest of it is kind of like the grind to get to that? And like, you know, you think about, you know, in the UK we're probably luckier actually than some sort of corporate jobs in the States, where we get probably 5 or 6 weeks holiday a year. But even that 5 or 6 weeks out of 52, you know, that's when you live. Like, is that right? I don't know. And I appreciate that maybe you could argue is the luxury of, you know, being in a certain, you know, position in life and so on and so forth. Absolutely, not everybody has that luxury of choice, but it is one that sort of sticks with me a little bit, I think, and it's interesting. It feels timely speaking to you at this particular moment where I'm having this kind of like psychological kind of like examination of myself. It's a very, very interesting conversation, and I think, you know, Here for More has probably turned up at the right time for me personally. So I'm grateful for you.
Oh, well, I'm happy to hear that. And those concepts are just as much for me as they are to help others, right? To help other people think about it as much as I am listening to the advice myself. It's twofold.
Well, sometimes, I don't know about you, but sometimes doing something like a podcast where you are laying out these thoughts actually helps you to understand them yourself almost. You know, again, it's not something pre-podcast that I would have ever done. Is sort of talk about some of these concepts and thoughts that were in my mind, or listen to other people in this kind of way. So it's kind of its own learning experience as well. I don't know if you found that.
Oh yeah, totally. Every episode I learn something new, you know, especially when they can be conversational like this. Like that's what I love too. That's how my show is, and I learn something new every time. And it's different when you're, you know, you almost get kind of like nervous for a podcast episode too, because you're like, I'm gonna be, whether you're the person recording or the guest, you know, you're like diving into these things that maybe you haven't said out loud before.
Yeah.
Maybe you haven't really, or maybe you've thought about it, but it's been inside, and to put it into words, it's like, did I just say that? Did I just hear that? It's really cool though. There is nothing like it. I think podcasting's awesome.
Yeah, me too. It's definitely it's like I find like a fantastic medium, because it gives you this kind of like a creative, as a creator of one, it's kind of its own creative outlet, its own moment of self-reflection, its own learning experience, all the things we just talked about. And then as a listener to them, and I'm an avid listener of podcasts, have been for years, it's kind of there's not the pressure on it of like other kind of creative forms. There's not like if you read a book, you watch a film, there is a sense that you need to be there. It's not to say that you're going to ignore the podcast at all, but it's much more like being in a room with somebody. Like you're just partaking in a different conversation that you wouldn't have been invited to otherwise. That's the concept of it. I love, whether it's in your podcast or any other. I do love that concept. On that note, we've talked how great it is. We definitely need to tell some folks whereabouts they'd go to get hold of, hear for more, listen to the episodes. I think you're in the, is it I want to say 67-ish. I might be wrong, around that sort of number.
I think 62 is where we're headed. So,
62.
But very close. Yeah, that was a really close guess. So my podcast website is just hereformorepodcast.com. And that's probably the easiest, because right on the website it has like Apple or Spotify or wherever you listen, you can just open it from there. But it's available all those places, and Instagram is where I hang out all the time. That's just my name, Natalie J. Kraus, and yeah, that's where I am, talking to people and sharing just life, because I like connecting on that personal level as well. So those are the places for me. And yeah, Here for More podcast. If you or anyone, man, I always am looking for cool people to interview. So it's like, if you are listening and you know someone, send them my way, because that's what this is all about, is just continuing those conversations.
100%. Love it. Absolutely love it. You'll have to do a few live from the retreat as well.
Yes.
Be cool to hear the oceans.
Oh yes.
In the background.
That'd be wonderful.
Love it. And Natalie, thank you so much for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure chatting with you. Thoroughly recommend folks come and check out the podcast. If they can book a slot on the retreat, they absolutely should do that too, because that sounds idyllic. And check you out on Instagram too. So, thank you so much, and hopefully speak to you again soon.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, Jim. It's been wonderful. Talk soon.
Thank you.